Richard Feynman possessed the memory so frighteningly sharp that he could effortlessly recall complex equations, obscure footnotes, and exact dates from papers he had glanced at decades ago. He could extract deep knowledge on demand, as easily as picking a pen off a desk, leaving his peers at Caltech completely stunned. But here is the most shocking truth. His brain was biologically ordinary. He was not born with a photographic memory, and his IQ score was famously average for a physicist. There was no genetic lottery involved. Instead, his extraordinary intellect was a result of 5 very quiet, completely unglamorous daily habits, simple rituals that rewired his brain to lock in facts permanently. The first of these habits exposes the exact reason why instructors never forget what they teach, while students forget everything. Another habit uncovers why he constantly carried a hidden list of specific questions. And the final ritual, which began as a random joke with a spinning plate, ultimately led to his Nobel Prize. Most adults consume information today and forget almost all of it by the weekend. You are about to break that cycle. By the end of this video, you will learn the exact blueprint to permanently store any complex information into your long-term memory, instantly pulling it out whenever you need it. Sit up straight, grab a cup of coffee, and open a blank notebook right now. Pay close attention, because skipping even one of these habits will break the entire sequence. Let's start with the foundation. Habit number 1, teach it to a child. Back in the 1950s, Richard Feynman took a teaching job in Brazil. He walked into the lecture halls and was completely stunned. His students were human encyclopedias. They could quote complex physics equations syllable by syllable. But the moment he asked them to apply those exact equations to a real-world problem, total silence. Blank stares. They possessed fragile knowledge. They memorized vocabulary, but grasped zero actual concepts. This is exactly what most adults do today. You consume a 300-page book or watch a documentary, nod your head, and a week later you cannot recall a single actionable detail. In 2014, researchers at Washington University ran a fascinating study. 2 groups read the same text. Group A prepared for a standard test. Group B was told they had to teach the material. Group B retained significantly more information, even though they never actually taught anyone. Just the mental shift of preparing to explain altered their brain's encoding process. Here is your assignment tonight. Pick one concept you absorbed today. Stand in an empty room and explain it out loud to an imaginary 12-year-old. No jargon, no complex vocabulary. When you start stammering, that is exactly where your true knowledge ends and your bluffing begins. And that brings us to the second habit. A habit so bizarre it was locked away inside a hidden leather journal that no one discovered until after he died. When Feynman passed away in 1988, his peers were cleaning out his office. Hidden among his papers, they found a weathered leather notebook. The title on the cover was striking, "Notebook of Things I Don't Know About." He didn't build a monument to his intelligence. He built a catalog of his ignorance. Modern adults do the exact opposite. We buy expensive planners, highlight things we already understand, and color code our comfort zones. We run away from the mental friction of confusion, but a muscle does not grow without physical resistance. Memory works exactly the same way. Get the cheapest notebook you can find. Ugly paper. Every time a conversation or a podcast leaves you slightly confused, write down the gap in your understanding. Once a week, pick one single gap. Research it until you can easily explain it to that imaginary 12-year-old. Over months, your greatest confusions will transform into your most permanent knowledge. Now stop for a second. The next habit is not a memory technique at all. It is a psychological anchor, and without it, every flashcard and study hack you use will inevitably fail. Habit 3, the mental anchor. Feynman once shared a private strategy with a junior physicist. He called it his 12 favorite problems. He advised keeping a constant mental roster of a dozen deep, unresolved questions, things you obsess over while driving or waiting in line for coffee. Why? Because the human brain is fundamentally terrible at holding on to random, floating facts. Neuroscientists refer to this mechanism as elaborative encoding. When a new piece of information floats in an empty mental space, it vanishes within days. But when you actively tie it to a question you already care about, it locks into your long-term storage like a magnet sliding into place. Tonight, sit in a quiet room with a blank piece of paper. Write down 5 to 12 genuine questions you desperately want to figure out. Not what sounds intellectual, what actually keeps you up at night. Review that list every Sunday. You will suddenly notice the world feeding you puzzle pieces everywhere you go, and your brain will effortlessly store them. Stay with me, because habit 4 is the brutal metric neuroscientists use to verify actual learning. And unfortunately, almost everyone fails it on their first attempt. Habit 4, the brutal reconstruction. Whenever Feynman encountered a difficult new concept, he performed a ritual his peers found borderline absurd. He would read the material, close the textbook, push it aside, and pull out a completely blank sheet of paper. He would then force himself to reconstruct the entire argument from absolute scratch. Most adults fall victim to the illusion of reading. You read a page 3 times, your eyes slide over the familiar words, and your brain whispers, "I know this." You are mistaking the comfortable feeling of recognizing words for the brutal work of actual comprehension. Purdue University cognitive scientists quantified this in 2011. Students who repeatedly reviewed a text scored abysmally low on delayed tests. But students who shut the book and forced themselves to recall the information from a blank page scored dramatically higher. Tomorrow at work, when you finish a critical meeting or a complicated article, close your laptop. Write down the core takeaways from pure memory. You will struggle. You will forget things. That failure is the exact biological mechanism that wires permanent memory. We have one habit remaining. It is the catalyst that Feynman protected fiercely, and if you lose this, the other 4 will completely collapse. Habit 5, the chemical glue. In the late 1940s, Feynman was working at Cornell University. He was utterly burned out. The weight of academic expectations had drained all the life from his work. One afternoon in the dining hall, he watched a bored student toss a plate into the air. He noticed a peculiar wobble in the spinning plate. There was no practical reason to study it, no funding, no impending deadline. He just started calculating the plate's motion out of pure, unadulterated play. That playful, seemingly useless calculation eventually ignited the research that won him the Nobel Prize. Your brain actively refuses to encode boring data. You can force yourself to stare at a spreadsheet for 10 hours and nothing sticks. But you vividly remember a movie dialogue from 20 years ago. Why? Emotion. Amusement, curiosity, and surprise flood your neural pathways with dopamine. It acts as a chemical adhesive for your memory. Without that chemical glue, raw discipline will always fail. Treat your learning like a toy, not a chore. Argue with the material. Ask yourself, what if the exact opposite were true? Create ridiculous, embarrassing mental images to anchor the data. The moment you strip away the heavy burden of homework and replace it with play, your retention skyrockets. 5 simple rituals. Teach the concept simply. Map your ignorance in an ugly notebook. Carry a mental list of your deepest questions. Rebuild knowledge on a blank page. And fiercely protect your sense of play. Do these consistently, and that mental fog most adults complain about after age 40 will begin to evaporate. The fundamental difference between you and Richard Feynman is not genetic luck. It is not an astronomical IQ or a magical photographic memory. It is simply permission. The permission to look foolish while teaching an invisible child. The permission to openly admit what you do not know. the permission to turn serious, complex problems into personal games. Give yourself that permission today. Build these habits, and you will never have to fake your understanding again.